Ooh. It's crunchy on the outside, really soft and pillowy on the inside, packed with flavor, and it's just so easy to make. I'm going to show you how to make focaccia right at home. Okay guys, how's it going? Welcome back to Sam Kitchen. My name is Sam Lin. I am a home cook who's really passionate about sustainability and, more importantly, save money by making things at home, and hopefully that can be helping you guys save $1 here and there. So we're still in January, and I think most of us are still trying to recover from Christmas and New Year. Unfortunately, life still goes on. We still need to eat, so I'm here to help you. And cut to the chase, I'm going to show you how to make focaccia at home. So after I started learning how to bake sourdough, and I just can't stop but thinking that bread is actually one of the biggest rip-off if you'd be spending money to buy it from shops. So like a loaf of sourdough, if you make it at home, it's 60 cents. And then if you buy it from a shop, that's easily $8 to $12. And that just blows my mind. So I'm going to try to introduce you as much of like easy bread recipes that you can do at home to replace any of the bread that you need to buy from the shops. And focaccia, it's super easy. The ingredient list is so simple, and the making process, the recipe, takes minimum effort, and the outcome is bloody delicious. And I can't wait to show you how it's done. I think it took me about 2-3 hours to make this loaf. The real active time that was required was probably, I would say, 20-30 minutes. Before you get into the recipe, if you can gently just tap the like button down there, that will really help out my YouTube channel and promote my video to a wider audience. If you learn something, if you think my content will actually benefit other people, I would really appreciate you doing that. Thank you so much for doing that, and let's get into the recipe. So focaccia being one of the easiest bread to make, the ingredient list is, once again, super simple. To make bread, we obviously need some flour. Sticking to the absolute basic here, we're using plain flour. You can sub it with bread flour for more gluten formation and chewier texture. To make sure the bread is fluffy and airy, we'll need some yeast. Next, we need some sugar here, not to add to the bread to make it sweet, but just for our yeast mixture to give our yeast activation a kickstart. One other core component is some good extra virgin olive oil to achieve that iconic crust. Some salt to season. Last but not the least, we'll need some toppings to go with the focaccia. Some suggestions are onions, garlic, olive, rosemary, or some sliced tomato, just to name a few. That's all of the ingredients we need, and as always, they're all listed on the screen here, so you can take a screenshot for later or pause here to gather your ingredients. First thing first, we're going to activate our yeast. Before we go ahead and make our yeast mixture, we'll need to understand the hydration rate of our dough. By hydration, I'm referring to the flour to water ratio. With our focaccia, we're aiming for a 70% hydration to get a slightly sticky but workable dough. By using a scale, we're going to want 210 grams of water to 300 grams of flour. I'm keeping whole number as much as I can so it's easily scalable. Grab a pot and add in 210 grams of water, and then I move over to the stove to heat up our water. You can microwave it or use a kettle, whatever floats your boat. We're aiming for 40 to 50 degrees Celsius, or some crazy number in the hundreds in Fahrenheit. I had the pot on the stove for about 10 seconds, and I got the water to a nice lukewarm temperature, a similar temperature to a nice warm bath. Use a thermometer if you have one handy, just to be precise. Next, with 300 grams of flour, we want around 6 grams of yeast, that is 2 grams of yeast per 100 grams of flour. Add it to our lukewarm water, and then we want to add in 1 teaspoon or 4 grams of sugar. Give it a good stirring, and make sure that the sugar and yeast are dissolved. Sugar here is acting as food to get our yeast reaction started. For better visuals, I pour the mixture into a glass container, which is totally not necessary if I wasn't making a video for you guys. After about 10 minutes, we can see a layer of foam on top, which is an indication of the yeast eating away our sugar and releasing carbon dioxide. If there is no observable activities, the yeast is dead and you'll need to get some new ones. Next, we wet out the flour. As mentioned earlier, we want 300 grams of flour for our focaccia. Next, we add in our activated yeast mixture. And after that, 9 grams of extra virgin olive oil or 3 grams per 100 grams of flour. And then 6 grams of salt, which is 2 grams per 100 grams of flour. That is all we need for the dough. Put the scale aside and start mixing. Get intimate with your food, Sam says. It's very good, very nice! For the first mix, give it a rough mixing until there is no dry flour left. It is okay if it's still lumpy. Use a spatula to clean up the bits on your fingers. Use a lid to cover the bowl and let the dough hydrate for about 20 minutes. After 20 minutes is up, we want to mix the dough using the roux bar method. It's essentially mimicking the movement of a dough hook by forming your hand into a scoop and repetitively scoop the dough until it's well combined. Do this for about 5 minutes. The method also helps us build out the initial gluten strength. Cover the dough after that and we'll let it rest for another 20 minutes. Coming back, we want to prep a bowl of water on the side to dip our hand in so the dough won't stick to our hand. Now, we want to build up the gluten in our dough by performing stretch and fold. Pinch one side of the dough, pull it as high as you can before it breaks, and fold it back down. Once one side is done, turn it 90 degrees and we want to do it 4 times. I also like to put the new folds on the bottom of the dough so they won't unfold easily. Once done, we put the lid back on and let the dough rest for 20 minutes. The gluten in our dough is what makes it chewy and captures air bubbles. This step can be skipped, but you will end up having a more flaky loaf. After 4 sets of stretch and folds, we can see our dough is now nice and smooth with some air bubbles present. The elasticity of the dough is also an indication of good gluten formation. Next thing to do is to transfer our dough onto our baking tray. Lightly grease our baking tray with some neutral tasting oil, just enough to cover the bottom and sides. Get your hand in and just rub it in. Throw in some sarcasm if you wish. Transfer the dough into our oil tray and spread it out to the 4 corners as much as possible. If the dough keeps bouncing back, let it rest for another 10 to 20 minutes and then stretch it. Once the dough is stretched out, we want to let the dough ferment and rise for 1.5 to 2 hours depending on the temperature, or until it doubles in size. Instead of using plastic wraps here, just find a big enough cover to cover it. I find chopping boards quite versatile when it comes to that. Being summer here in Australia right now, I let the dough ferment for about 1.5 hours and the dough has definitely doubled in size. If you don't want to bake it right away, you can ferment the dough in the fridge up to 3 days instead. See the comparison of our dough. Left is before, right is after fermentation. One last thing to do is our toppings. I'm keeping it simple and topping with some sliced onion here. Nothing fancy here. Use a sharp knife and just slice away. Olives, garlic, sun-dried tomatoes are all very common toppings for focaccia. Drizzle some olive oil over the dough and sprinkle a generous amount of toppings over our dough. The most satisfying step of all is to use our wetted fingers to poke some dimples in our dough. I also make sure that I push down most of the onions so they don't just come falling off after being baked. Some flaky salt on top for seasoning and texture. Once that is all done, into a preheated oven at 200 degrees Celsius for 20 minutes. I started from the middle of the oven and move it up to crisp it up after about halfway through. Once 20 minutes is up, I took the tray out and transferred our focaccia onto a wide rack to cool to avoid the heat making our bread having a soggy butt. The golden crust on the outside and some slightly burnt onion, oh boy, had to do some ASMR for you right here. The cost breakdown is as below. 300 grams of plain flour at $1 per kilo equals to 30 cents. 6 grams of yeast at $15 a kilo equals to 9 cents. 4 grams of sugar and $1.50 a kilo equals to 0.6 cents. 6 grams of salt at 90 cents per kilo equals to 0.54 cent. 20 grams of extra virgin olive oil at $5.30 a kilo equals to 10.6 cent. Half an onion is about 5 cent. So altogether, a loaf of focaccia costed us 54.85 cent to make. You can easily pay 10 times for a loaf from a bakery. Alright, and there we have it. We've got our focaccia done here. It's one of the easiest bread to make. The amount of effort that is required is so minimal, but the output is just so satisfying. It's crunchy on the outside and super soft on the inside. The bread is also very versatile. You can bake a loaf, cut it in half sideways, and then just use it as a sandwich bread. It's delicious. Alright, I'm going to dig in and just let you know how it tastes like. You know what it reminds me of? Fast food or Domino's pizza. Really golden, soaked in oil. Not sure if it's a good thing, but kind of like lots of flavor of the grease, and it's super crusty on the bottom and also on the top. We got our toppings. Onion works really well alongside with our Focaccia salt. Dunk it into soup, turn it into some kind of garlic bread. This itself is just such a treat on its own as well. The making of focaccia somehow resembles as what we would do for sourdough, building up the strength and also let the yeast do its work. The only difference I would say is that using instant yeast or using dry yeast, the fermentation happens a lot faster, but obviously you can replace your instant yeast with our sourdough, and I think I might do a video on that in the future on how to use our sourdough starter to make some delicious focaccia. I hope you learned something from this video. I hope you really give this a try. It's such an easy recipe and you can't really fail. Just look at it and measure the height and you'll be able to know how much of the air has been trapped in your bread, and then you'll be able to know how thick your bread is going to be and how much bubble you're going to have in here. So thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you do, give it a like. Just gently poke the like button down here. That would really help me out. Thank you so much, and I will see you in the next one.